Live from our 7 Tasmania studios, your nightly news with Peter Murphy begins now.
Good evening, everyone. Authorities are implementing strict new measures to crack down on international arrivals who threaten to further spread coronavirus in Tasmania. All arrivals will now have to hand over details to health officials, with strict consequences for anyone who ignores warnings to self-isolate.
The gateways to Tasmania. Hundreds of thousands of people pass through our airports and Spirit of Tasmania terminals each year. But as of tomorrow, those passengers will be subject to strict new measures.
We'll be introducing the Tasmanian arrival card, and it will be mandated that if you are an international traveller entering the state or you are a Tasmanian returning home, that you will need to provide us with your details.
Aimed at keeping in touch with passengers to stop the spread of coronavirus. Anyone who arrives from overseas will still have to self-isolate for 14 days, and tough penalties could apply if you ignore these new rules.
The Director of Public Health can require people or a class of people to stay in a particular place if they pose a risk to the community, and there are penalties up to in the thousands of dollars.
At this stage, ruling out checking the temperatures of every person who arrives at an airport.
Because people aren't necessarily sick when they come through the gate, you miss them. Also, you pick up a lot of people who don't have coronavirus.
Overnight, Tasmania recorded its 7th case of the disease, a woman in her 50s in a stable condition. She's the second close contact of a previous case, aboard a privately chartered yacht together while travelling.
We had one person who was ill in a confined setting and transmitted the infection to 2 other people who we already knew of as close contacts and who we were watching and who came forward quite promptly when they became unwell.
Meanwhile, Labor is calling for empty hotel rooms to be used to accommodate health workers so they don't spread the virus.
We've got a health workforce that's tossing up how it's supposed to continue to do what it does and not spread the virus to those it loves back at home.
Plans are currently underway to reconfigure hospitals to allow for triaging of patients with coronavirus while limiting their exposure to other patients. This includes a provision to have separate emergency department facilities.
And with our politicians preparing to gather in Parliament tomorrow, they're determined for the sitting to go ahead, but it's set to look very different.
There will need to be some changes and we'll need to modify as appropriate. Social distancing will need to be considered.
The Premier will hand down the first stage of his economic stimulus package tomorrow.
In an unprecedented move, the RSL has decided it will cancel all of its Anzac Day services across Tasmania. Live now to our reporter Michelle Wisby. Good evening, Michelle. What makes those events a particular risk?
Well, Pete, the RSL says many of its own members are in that highest risk category for coronavirus, as it is older Tasmanians that are most vulnerable to serious complications. Now, obviously, the service here at the Hobart Cenotaph and in other major centres would have breached the limit on gatherings of 500 people and would have had to be cancelled anyway. But the RSL is worried Tasmanians would still head to more regional ceremonies to mark what is, of course, a very important occasion. So it's decided to cancel services of more than 50 of its sub-branches across the state. The state president says Anzac Day is no less important this year, but this tough decision is in the best interest of its members and of the wider community.
A lot of our members and veterans that turn up at these events fall within categories which are vulnerable, those being the aged and those with underlying health conditions, and then you've got to take in the public as well. And look, it is disappointing. I'm an ex-serviceman myself, and I would love to be out there paying my respects on Anzac Day as we do normally, but under the circumstances we can't take that risk.
Now, the RSL doesn't run every Anzac Day service across the state, but it is now encouraging other community organisations and councils to follow its lead. And Pete, it is such a sad decision, but it is a cautious one.
Yes, certainly, Michelle. This issue is certainly far-reaching and gets different every day. Michelle Wisby joining us there. One Tasmanian school has taken the sudden decision to close its campus down, moving lessons online in a bid to stem the spread of coronavirus. State health authorities say preemptive school closures are a measure not yet needed and may not be effective.
A school without students. The grounds of Scotch Oak burn eerily quiet today. The classrooms empty as the college announced a sudden shutdown. a preemptive measure in light of international developments.
Looking at the worldwide trends of what has been the implications of communities not acting soon enough and waiting until extreme circumstances dictate that they have to take drastic measures.
The only activity at school drop-off this morning, students coming to collect study materials as the college moves to online learning for at least 2 weeks.
We'll have a relatively seamless transition to the e-learning approach, and that we'll be able to adapt quite readily.
Public schools have been instructed to cancel assemblies, excursions, sports carnivals and parent-teacher meetings. But Public Health says school closures wouldn't be proportionate or effective at this stage.
Should that advice change, I will not hesitate to close a school. But at this stage, the advice is that schools should continue.
The university is keeping its campuses open for now, but today announced a staged transition to online learning, so it's prepared.
Next week, we will be aiming to do all our lecture content online, but we won't be trying to do all our tutorials online. Then the following week, lectures and tutorials together. So it's about staging it up.
The mix of students that UTAS have is quite different to what we see in public schools.
After Scotch Oak Burn's decision, other private schools are considering their options. Michael Breen, 7 Tasmania News.
The roof of a Clarendon Vale home has caved in as a result of a suspicious fire. The Rockingham Drive property was left gutted in the aftermath of an early morning blaze. Crews were called to the scene at around 4 o'clock to find the unoccupied home well alight. Police say the cause is being treated as suspicious and damage to the privately owned residence is estimated to be worth around $300,000. Tasmanians have banded together in a new attempt to stamp out racism in our community. The Hobart Respects All campaign aims to offer help and support to those discriminated against, a problem they say still flies under the radar.
Spreading a simple message, a new campaign aimed to make sure everyone feels safe and at home in our community. But sadly, we still have a long way to go when it comes to stamping out racism.
Sometimes people throw rocks in them, so it's really hard for them to focus on everyday living as well. So they do feel depressed sometimes about this.
She's experienced racist slurs firsthand and says it's an issue that often goes unnoticed by others.
I feel so embarrassed, and sometimes I feel like maybe I don't belong here, or maybe they don't care. You know, I think it's better not to stereotype.
But the Hobart City Council is taking action, launching the Hobart Respects All initiative today.
Firstly, it's actually about letting people know that they are not alone and that we are here to support them. And secondly, we are wanting to let people know of simple steps that they can do to help people who are experiencing racism.
Saying many countries are still experiencing racism in their everyday life, as well as at events and gatherings. Also noticing a rise in incidents as coronavirus escalates.
We've had many people in the community come to us and tell us about incidences that have happened in the supermarket, on the bus, also walking around in the street, of racial slurs that have been aimed at them.
Urging anyone who witnesses racist behaviour to speak up. Michelle Wisby, 7 Tasmania News.
It was a task that required a crane and plenty of manpower, but today's Tasmania's oldest boat found a new home in Georgetown. The piece of maritime history will finally be on show to the public after years of being carefully restored.
Resting in all her glory, stretching 28 feet and weighing close to a tonne, after 155 years, this is expected to be the final home of Admiral.
It's probably a little bit bigger than I'd imagined.
A trailblazer of the high seas, the vessel was carved from hew and pine in Hobart 1865.
It was tearing around the waterfront, going out to the sailing ships that were coming in to grab the mail, because that was very lucrative.
But for a treacherous period interstate, it was unkept and unloved, eventually purchased by Tasmanian restorers for just $1.
She was sitting on the hard. Her keel was rotten, and the owners of the boatyard wanted her gone.
Now it sits proudly among its nautical comrades at Georgetown's Bass and Flinders Centre, but the mission to get it here took more than 2 hours. The roof had to be cut open, while a crane meticulously lowered the boat into place.
We knew it was going to be very tight to fit it in, but it worked, so I'm happy with that.
Only 2 weeks ago, the veteran glided across the water for its final voyage. So even 150 years old, it still handles really well?
Better than any boat that I row these days. Yeah, no, she's a beautiful design.
Its glory days now behind, but marine enthusiasts say it will still turn heads here in Georgetown.
People can come in and touch them and look at them, and I think this is an ideal home for it.
It will open to the public in the coming weeks. Garth Burley, 7 Tasmania News.
Tasmanian sport is continuing to crumble as coronavirus tightens its grip. In football, the Tasmanian State League has been delayed until the end of May. Late today, Tas Racing announced spectators will be barred from meetings, while other local sports like netball are deciding on their futures tonight. The TSL is the latest competition proving it is not immune to coronavirus. It, along with all other state leagues across the country, have been postponed until the end of May.
We're united across our industry in making hard decisions necessary to protect the health and livelihoods in our football family.
It also affects the NAB League competition. The AFL says the decision is based on the part-time nature of the TSL and the financial implications for the clubs. Regional leagues like the NWFL, NTFA and SFL will now have to make a call on their futures too. Late today, Tas Racing made a call to bar spectators from meets. Racing will go on and still be live streamed though, while with one Sheffield Shield fixture remaining, player safety forced the hand of the states which unanimously agreed to call stumps on the season.
We were going to have to fly from Tasmania to Victoria for our last game. That potentially we could have had players in isolation in Victoria for up to 14 days if we had a positive test, or even if there was some suspicion of coronavirus with one of our players.
Now it's up to individuals on what they do next. Several players and coaches are contracted for tournaments overseas, while at home, Cricket Tasmania is hoping to see Hobart's one-day international against New Zealand rescheduled.
Obviously it wouldn't have been a spectacle at all on Friday if it had gone ahead, so a made-for-TV game only. I think the cancellation of it was wise.
Meanwhile, Cricket North's grand final is due to start on Friday. The league says it's likely to go ahead, but a firm decision will be made tomorrow. Netball Tasmania has already scrapped one round of games. Tonight, clubs will meet with the league to work out what to do going forward. Cavaliers player Dana Lester says the disruption is disappointing, but understandable.
We've never seen anything like this before, and so moving forward, we have to take the advice of others.
Cavs will train tonight as normal, but they are anticipating more delays.
From a player, all you want to do is play, but at the moment we can't. So I guess we just look forward to when that can resume, hoping that it does.
The state's most attended sporting event, the Supercars at Symmons Plains, is also under a cloud. Organisers say they're prepared to run the local event later in the year if the situation worsens. NPL Soccer is yet to make a call on its future, while for our Olympic hopefuls, Jake Birdwhistle's upcoming triathlon in Bermuda has been canned. Our swimmers, rowers, cyclists and track and field athletes are also dealing with a raft of scrapped events, leaving a barren state of play in our local sporting landscape. And Somerset's Kyron Bacon has made the podium in the latest round of the Australian Off-Road Championship with a third placing in the E1 class. Of the other Tasmanians, Jonty Reinders finished second in the E3, while Dalton Johnson claimed second place in the two-stroke cup. Kobe Connolly had a top 5 finish in the EJ class. Tate Young also impressed, placing second in J2. Hobart's Jack Skeggs was 8th in his class. Some of the weekend's racing was called off due to heavy rain.
Good evening. It was partly cloudy day across the state today. Launceston was the state's top, reaching 22, a high of 19 across Hobart and Devonport, Burnie 20. 21 was a popular temperature across Flinders Island, Smithton and Strawn, Lowhead 19 and a high of 18 at St Helens. On the close-up shows partly cloudy conditions over Tasmania. Further out, middle-level cloud extends across southern WA to the Bight ahead of a low to the south of Western Australia. Tomorrow, a weakening front approaches the southwest of Tasmania, while a cold front crosses the south of WA. North to northeasterly winds tomorrow 10 to 20 knots, swells up to 2.5 metres in the west and south and below 1 metre in the north. A strong wind warning is current for southwestern and western coastal waters from southeast Cape to Sandy Cape. Tomorrow's forecast now: Hobart a high of 26, Adventure Bay 22, possible late showers at Tarraleah. In the north, Launceston 23, looking partly cloudy across Devonport and Bridport. Burnie tomorrow, partly cloudy, 24 at Strawn, Marrawar, a high of 22. Possible late showers about St Helens and Swansea, Whitemark, a mostly sunny 23. The UV forecast, high 7s across the state. Looking ahead to the 3-day forecast, Wednesday, showers about the west and far south. Thursday, showers developing about the west in the morning, and Friday, showers contracting to the west and far south during the day. Capital cities, Perth expecting a shower or two tomorrow, mostly sunny across Adelaide and Melbourne, and Sydney reaching a high of 24. And currently Hobart sunny and 17, Launceston partly cloudy and 18, and Devonport 17. That's all for weather tonight, Murph.
Thanks, Jackie. We'll see you tomorrow night. And that's all our news for now. I'll be back later with updates. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Good night.